I stood alone in Holy Cross Chapel, 82 years old, clutching a soaked tissue with trembling hands.
I stood alone in Holy Cross Chapel, 82 years old, clutching a soaked tissue with trembling hands. Robert's mahogany casket sat silent before me. 54 years together. 60 empty pews. My son texted, "Funeral cost? I'll Venmo half." My daughter sent nothing. I stared at the casket, at the vacant seats, and whispered, "Is this the family I gave my life to build? Or just the beginning of a truth far more painful?" Welcome to Voices of Auntie Rose, where stories of family, forgiveness, resilience, and the courage to rise above betrayal come to life with heart and soul. We're so glad you're here, joining a community that celebrates the unbreakable human spirit. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story. And it would be amazing if you could like this video, share it, or drop a comment letting us know what time it is and which city or country you're watching from. Your shares and comments are the greatest gift, the powerful inspiration that keeps this channel growing and spreading meaningful life lessons every single day. Now, let's dive into today's story. I stood alone in the chapel of Holy Cross Church, my arthritic fingers clutching a crumpled tissue that had long since outlived its purpose. The October rain hammered against the stained glass windows, those same windows where Robert and I had stood 54 years ago, promising forever. Now, at 82 years old, I was keeping that promise alone. The casket sat before me, polished mahogany reflecting the dim chapel lights. Robert's casket. My Robert. The man who'd held my hand through every storm, who'd built our Victorian home on Hawthorne Boulevard with his own calloused hands, who'd never missed a single morning of brewing my coffee exactly how I liked it, 2 sugars, a splash of cream. I looked around at the rows of empty pews, 60 seats, all vacant except for mine. Father O'Brien shifted uncomfortably near the altar, his kind eyes darting between me and the chapel entrance. Mrs. Rodriguez, our neighbor of 30 years, sat 3 rows behind me, dabbing at her eyes. She'd brought a casserole yesterday, pressed my hand, whispered, "They should be here, Margaret. They should be here." But they weren't. David, my firstborn, my son, was somewhere in San Francisco, probably in his glass tower office overlooking the bay, closing another multi-million-dollar deal for his tech startup. Too important to come home. Too busy to say goodbye to the father who'd worked 2 jobs to send him to Stanford. Jennifer, my baby girl, my sunshine, was at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, saving lives, she'd say. Too crucial to leave the ICU. Too indispensable to honor the man who'd held her hand through medical school anxiety attacks and paid every penny of her Harvard tuition, $192,000 in loans we'd taken out and paid back. Ourselves, never asking for a dime in return. The text from David had arrived at 6:30 this morning while I was buttoning up my black dress with trembling fingers. Emergency board meeting, investors threatening to pull out. Can't reschedule. Dad would understand. We'll call tonight. No, I love you. No, I'm sorry. Just cold, clinical words that felt like shards of glass in my chest. The phone call never came. Jennifer didn't even text. She'd left a voicemail 2 days ago. 2 days her voice rushed, distracted, already moving on to her next task. "Mom, you know I'm on call. I literally cannot leave. Tell Dad I love him, and I'll visit the grave when things calm down." Things never calm down. And the dead don't wait. "Mrs. Chen," Father O'Brien's gentle voice pulled me back to the present. "Would you like us to wait a few more minutes? Perhaps they're caught in traffic?" I almost laughed. Traffic. As if the problem was something as simple as the I-5 being backed up. As if my children's absence could be explained away by something as mundane as road conditions. "No, Father," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Robert hated tardiness. "We start now." He nodded slowly, understanding more than I'd said. Mrs. Rodriguez squeezed my shoulder as she passed to take her seat. "Mr." Kim from the corner store was there too. I noticed a man Robert barely knew, but who'd always appreciated how my husband treated everyone with dignity. And there was young Sarah Martinez, one of my former kindergarten students, now grown with children of her own. She'd taken time off work to be here. A student I'd taught 25 years ago showed more respect than my own children. The service began. Father O'Brien spoke of Robert's dedication, his kindness, his 40 years working at the Portland shipyard. He mentioned Robert's love of jazz music, his award-winning Rose Garden, his devotion to family. That last word family felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Family. I thought of the filing cabinet in Robert's study, the one I'd opened last night in the small hours when sleep wouldn't come. Inside were folders meticulously organized as Robert always was labeled David and Jennifer. Years of financial records, decades of unconditional giving. $90,000 for David's first startup that crashed within 8 months. Another $45,000 for his down payment on that overpriced San Francisco condo. $62,000 to cover his credit card debt when his second business venture failed. "Just until I get back on my feet, Mom," he'd said, his voice honey-sweet over the phone. We never saw a penny back. $192,000 for Jennifer's medical school. Another $30,000 for her wedding at Martha's Vineyard. Nothing too fancy, Mom, just something intimate that somehow required a live orchestra and lobster for 200 guests. $28,000 for the Tesla she absolutely needed for her commute. It's an investment in the environment, Mom, you understand, right? Over $500,000. More than $500,000 we'd given them over the years, Robert and I. Money we'd scraped together from his shipyard wages and my kindergarten teacher's salary. Money we'd saved by buying store-brand groceries and wearing our clothes until they were threadbare. Money we'd meant to use for retirement, for the cruise to Alaska Robert had always dreamed about, for the new roof that still leaks when it rains hard. We gave it all to them, gladly, willingly, because that's what parents do, right? That's what love looks like. The hymn began Amazing Grace, Robert's favorite. My voice cracked on the first word. Mrs. Rodriguez's hand found mine, held tight. I remembered the last time I'd sung this hymn. It was at David's college graduation, Robert's arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride as our son crossed that stage. David had hugged us both afterward, told us we were the best parents in the world, promised he'd make us proud. That was 27 years ago. The last time he'd hugged me was probably 20 years ago. The last time he'd called just to talk, not to ask for something, was I couldn't even remember. After the service, I walked behind the pallbearers men from Robert's union, men who'd worked alongside him for decades, men who showed up when his own son didn't. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, each step requiring conscious thought. Left foot, right foot, breathe. The cemetery was a 15-minute drive from the church. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the wind was bitter, cutting through my coat. I stood at the graveside, watching as they lowered Robert into the earth. The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. This was real, this was forever, and I was facing it alone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For one desperate, pathetic moment, I hoped, prayed it might be David or Jennifer, finally realizing, finally caring. I pulled it out with shaking hands. It was David. How much did the funeral cost? I'll Venmo you my half. Not. How are you holding up? Not I'm sorry I wasn't there. Not even I love you, Mom. Just, how much? Something inside me cracked. Not broke. Broke implies it might be fixed. This was deeper. This was a fault line opening up in the foundation of everything I'd believed about my family, about my children, about the life Robert and I had built. I looked down at his message, then at the hole in the ground where they'd just placed my husband, the man who'd loved these children more than his own life, the man who'd worked himself to exhaustion to give them everything, the man they couldn't spare 2 hours to honor. My fingers moved across the screen. Don't worry about it. I turned off my phone. Mrs. Rodriguez approached as the other mourners began to leave. Margaret, she said softly, you come to my house tonight. You shouldn't be alone. Thank you, Rosa, I whispered, but I need to go home. There are things I need to do. She studied my face, her dark eyes full of understanding and something else, approval maybe. She nodded. You know where I am if you need me. I drove home through streets that seemed unfamiliar, though I'd driven them for 48 years. The Victorian house on Hawthorne looked smaller somehow, more fragile. Robert's truck was still in the driveway. I hadn't been able to bring myself to move it yet. His coffee mug was still on the kitchen counter where he'd left it 3 weeks ago, the morning before the stroke that took him from me. 3 weeks. He'd been sick for 3 weeks, in and out of consciousness, the doctors telling us to prepare, to say goodbye. I'd called David and Jennifer immediately. You should come, I'd said. It might be time. I'll try to get away next week, David had said. Next week came and went. He never showed. Jennifer had been more direct. Mom, you're being dramatic. Dad's strong. He'll pull through. I can't just abandon my patients every time there's a health scare. Every time. As if Robert had made a habit of nearly dying. As if his life was just one of many inconveniences cluttering up her pristine, successful existence. I walked through the house, each room a museum of memories. The living room where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases. The kitchen where Robert had taught both kids to make his famous blueberry pancakes. David's old bedroom, unchanged since he'd left for college, still decorated with his high school debate trophies. Jennifer's room with her collection of medical textbooks from undergraduate years, the ones she'd been too busy to take with her. I ended up in Robert's study. The filing cabinet seemed to pulse with its own gravity, pulling me toward it. I opened the drawer labeled Estate Documents. There it was. Our will. Updated just 2 years ago, everything split evenly between David and Jennifer. The house, the savings account, Robert's pension, his life insurance. Every single thing we'd worked for, organized neatly into legal documents that would transfer our life's work to children who couldn't be bothered to show up. I sat in Robert's chair, the worn leather one that still smelled faintly of his aftershave, and I cried. Not the gentle, cleansing tears of grief. These were different. These were tears of rage and betrayal and something darker, something that felt like the death of illusions I'd held on to far too long. My phone was ringing. I'd turned it back on without thinking. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. I answered. "Mom," she said, her voice bright, cheerful even. "Sorry I missed the service. It was crazy here. Total madhouse. But listen, I was thinking you're probably going to sell the house now, right? It's way too big for you alone. David and I were talking, and we think you should move into a nice assisted living place. There's this great facility in Beaverton." "You were talking?" I interrupted, my voice flat. "You and David were talking about my future, today, while your father was being buried?" A pause. Then, "Well, we have to be practical, Mom. These decisions can't wait. And honestly, you're 82. You can't maintain that house by yourself. It only makes sense to—" "What makes sense," I said, each word careful and cold, "is that you were both too busy to say goodbye to your father, but you have plenty of time to discuss selling his house before he's even cold in the ground." "Mom, don't be like that. We're trying to help you." "Help me? Like you helped when your father was dying? Like you helped today at his funeral? That's not fair. You know I have responsibilities. And he didn't? Your father didn't have responsibilities? He just had you. And your brother? And he showed up for every single one of your recitals, your games, your graduations, your crises. Every single one." Silence on the other end. Then, "I don't have to listen to this. You're clearly not in a rational state. I'll call back when you've calmed down." She hung up on me. On the day we buried her father. I sat there in the darkening study, the will still open on the desk before me, and I made a decision. Not out of anger, though God knows I felt enough of that. Not out of spite or revenge, but out of clarity. Terrible, crystalline clarity. These were not my children anymore. Maybe they never had been. Maybe I'd spent 50 years raising strangers who looked like my babies but had grown into people I didn't recognize. People who measured love in dollar signs and convenience. People who could reduce their father's death to a line item on their tax returns. I picked up the phone and dialed. "Morrison Law Offices," the receptionist answered. "This is Margaret Chen," I said, my voice steady now, certain. "I need to make an appointment with James Morrison. As soon as possible. I need to change my will. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, I would grieve, not just for Robert, but for the children I thought I had, and the family I'd believed we were. The empty pews had shown me the truth. Now I would act on it." The morning after Robert's funeral, I woke up at 5:30, the same time I'd been waking up for 40 years to make his coffee. My body didn't understand that he was gone. My hand reached across the bed automatically, finding only cold sheets and the ghost of a memory. I lay there in the gray dawn light, listening to the house settle and creak. This Victorian had been our dream home, the one we'd saved for years to buy. Robert had spent every weekend for 2 years restoring it, sanding floors, fixing plaster, painting trim. David had been 7 then, Jennifer just 4. They'd helped by getting more paint on themselves than on the walls, and Robert had laughed, scooping them up, saying, "That's okay, we'll just paint around you." When had they stopped laughing with us? When had we become nothing more than a checkbook to them? I forced myself out of bed, every joint protesting. 82 years doesn't come gentle. I made my way downstairs, past the family photos lining the stairwell, David's Stanford graduation, Jennifer's white coat ceremony at Harvard, the four of us at Christmas 10 years ago. The last time they'd both come home at the same time. In the kitchen, I started the coffee maker out of habit, then remembered. Robert wasn't here to drink it. I poured a cup anyway, added 2 sugars and cream, set it on the table across from where I Saturday. If I squinted, I could almost pretend he was still here. My phone sat on the counter where I'd left it, still turned off. I stared at it for a long moment before powering it back on. Immediately, it began buzzing with notifications. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages. My heart leaped. Maybe they'd realized. Maybe they were sorry. Maybe. I opened the messages. David? Mom, seriously, call me back. We need to discuss the estate. David. The house is worth at least $850,000 in this market. Maybe more. We should list it as soon as possible. David. I talked to a realtor friend. She can get it on the market by next week. Jennifer. Mom, why aren't you answering? This is important. Jennifer. We need to talk about Dad's life insurance. How much was the policy? Jennifer. Also. His pension. Does it continue to you or does it end? We need to know for tax purposes. Not one. How are you holding up? Not one I love you. Not one word of comfort or grief or shared loss. Just money. Just logistics. Just the cold, brutal efficiency of children who saw their father's death as nothing more than a financial transaction. I scrolled further back, to messages from the day of the funeral. David. By the way, if you're going through Dad's stuff, his Rolex is technically a family heirloom. I'd like to have it. Jennifer. Did Dad have any other valuable jewelry? Or collectibles? We should probably get things appraised. I felt something dark and hot rising in my chest. Not anger, I'd moved past anger. This was colder, sharper. This was the moment you realize you've been living in a fantasy, and reality is a much uglier place. My phone rang. David. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Mom, finally, he said, not waiting for me to speak. Listen, I've got a conference call in 10 minutes, so let's make this quick. Jennifer and I have been talking. You've been talking a lot, haven't you? I said quietly. What? Yeah, well, someone has to be practical here. Look, the house, you can't stay there alone. It's too much for you. We found a great assisted living facility in Beaverton. It's got all the amenities, activities, even a book club. You'd love it. Would I? Of course, and it makes financial sense. The house is sitting on prime real estate. We sell it, put you in the facility, it's only like $3,000 a month, and the rest of the money gets invested. Jennifer and I can manage it for you. Manage it for me. Yeah, make sure it's growing, that you're taken care of. We're thinking a trust would be best. That way everything's protected and... Protected from whom, David? A pause. What do you mean? Who are we protecting the money from? Who's the threat here? Mom, I don't understand what you're getting at. We're trying to help. Your father was buried yesterday, I said, my voice shaking now. Yesterday. And you want to sell the house he built. The house he painted. The house where you learned to ride a bike in the driveway, and Jennifer learned to bake cookies in this kitchen. You want to sell his memories for $850,000 and put me in a facility for $3,000 a month. You're being emotional. I'm being honest. The words exploded out of me. Your father isn't even cold yet, David. He's not even... My voice broke. Silence on the other end. Then... I have to go. My meeting's starting. We'll talk about this when you're calmer. He hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. The coffee I'd made for Robert's ghost had gone cold. The kitchen felt too big, too empty, too full of everything we'd lost. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I opened Instagram, something I rarely did, but Jennifer was always on it. Always posting her perfect life for the world to see. There, at the top of my feed, posted 3 hours ago. 3 hours ago, while I was lying awake mourning her father, was a photo of Jennifer. She was at some trendy Boston restaurant, cocktail in hand, smiling at the camera with 3 other women. The caption read, "Girls' brunch, bottomless mimosas, and endless laughs." Exactly what I needed after a rough week. Number self-care number, doctor life number, Boston brunch. A rough week. Her father died. Her father, the man who'd held her when she had nightmares, who'd driven 8 hours to Boston when she'd called crying about failing an exam, who'd mortgaged his house to pay her tuition, had died. And she called it a rough week. And now, hours after his funeral that she didn't attend, she was posting smiling photos about bottomless mimosas. I clicked on David's profile. His most recent post, from yesterday afternoon during his father's funeral, was a photo from a golf course. Pebble Beach, looked like. He was mid-swing, the California sun gleaming off his designer sunglasses. Caption, "Killer drive on the 9th. Sometimes you need a day to decompress and focus on what matters. Number business life, number golfist life, number California. What matters?" I stared at that phrase until the words stopped making sense. What matters? Golf mattered. Brunch mattered. Their father apparently did not. I set the phone down carefully, afraid of what I might do if I kept holding it. My hands were trembling, my breath coming in short gasps. I felt dizzy. Sick. I made it to the sink, just in time, retching up the coffee I'd drunk, my body physically rejecting the reality I was being forced to see. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice came from behind me. "Margaret?" "Mija, I knocked, but you didn't answer." The door was unlocked, so She was at my side immediately, helping me to a chair, wetting a dish towel with cool water. "What happened?" "Are you okay?" "No," I whispered. "No, Rosa, I'm not okay." She pressed the towel to my forehead, her weathered hands steady and kind. "Tell me." So I did. I showed her the messages, the Instagram posts, told her about David's plans to sell the house and manage Robert's money. I told her everything while she held my hand and made soft, sympathetic sounds. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You know what you have to do." I called the lawyer. "Yesterday. I'm changing the will." "Good." Her voice was fierce. "Good. But Margaret, that's not enough. You need to protect yourself. Your children. They." She stopped, shook her head. "They're not thinking of you. They're thinking of themselves. And they'll keep taking until there's nothing left." "They already have," I said quietly. I looked at Robert's files. We gave them over $500,000 over the years. Maybe more. I stopped counting. Rosa's eyes widened. $500,000. Stanford tuition. Harvard Medical School. Business ventures that failed. Down payments. Credit cards. Weddings. Cars. Every time they called with a crisis, we gave them money. Every time they needed help, we were there. And now I gestured at my phone, at the evidence of their betrayal. Now this. "What about Tyler?" Rosa asked. "Jennifer's boy? He's a good kid, isn't he?" I thought of my grandson, 21 years old, studying environmental science at Reed College right here in Portland. The only one who visited regularly, who called just to talk, who'd helped Robert in the garden last summer without being asked. "He doesn't even know," I said. Jennifer didn't tell him about the funeral. He texted me last night he saw something on Facebook from one of Robert's old co-workers. He was devastated. Said he'd come over today. "So you see?" Rosa squeezed my hand. "Not all is lost. There's still good in this family. It's just not where you expected it to be." A knock at the door made us both turn. Through the window, I could see a young man with Robert's dark hair and my green eyes. Tyler. I stood up, legs still shaky, and went to let him in. The moment I opened the door, he wrapped me in a fierce hug. "Grandma," he choked out, "I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I would have been there if I'd known." And just like that, I was crying again. But these tears were different. These weren't the bitter tears of betrayal. These were tears of relief, of finding something real and good in the wreckage of my family. "Come in, sweetheart," I said, leading him to the kitchen. "Come in. We have a lot to talk about." Rosa made more coffee while Tyler and I sat at the table. I told him everything, not just about his grandfather's death, but about his mother and uncle, about the messages and the Instagram posts and the plans to sell the house. I showed him the evidence on my phone, watching his face grow pale, then red with anger. He started, then stopped, swallowing hard. "Grandma, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know any of this." "I know you didn't, honey." Mom told me Grandpa died peacefully, and that the funeral was just immediate family, very private. She said you wanted it that way. His voice broke. She lied to me. She lied so I wouldn't come. The three of us sat in that kitchen, me, Rosa, and Tyler, and I felt something shift inside me. The loneliness of yesterday, the crushing isolation of standing in that empty chapel, began to ease just slightly. I wasn't completely alone. There were still people who cared. They just weren't the ones I'd expected. Tyler, I said carefully, I need to tell you something. I'm changing my will. Your mother and uncle won't be inheriting anything. I expected shock, maybe protest. Instead, he just nodded. Good, he said firmly. After what they've done? Good. I'm setting up a trust. For you, and for a scholarship fund your grandfather and I are creating, the Chen Memorial Scholarship, for first-generation college students. His eyes filled with tears. Grandma, I don't know what to say. Say you'll remember him, I said softly. Say you'll remember what real love looks like. Not what your mother and uncle have shown, but what your grandfather gave every day of his life. Say you'll be the kind of man he was. I promise, Tyler whispered. I promise. Rosa reached across the table and took both our hands. Family, she said quietly, isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up, who stay, who love you not for what you can give them, but for who you are. I looked at these two people, my neighbor and my grandson, and I thought about the empty pews yesterday, about David's texts and Jennifer's Instagram posts, about the will I would change and the life I would reclaim. Tomorrow, I would meet with the lawyer. Tomorrow, everything would be different. But today, in this kitchen, with real love surrounding me, I took my first breath of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Tyler left around noon, promising to come back tomorrow to help me sort through Robert's things. Not to inventory them for sale the way David and Jennifer would have, but to honor them, to remember. Before he walked out the door, he hugged me again, long and tight, and whispered, I love you, Grandma. You're not alone in this. After he left, the house fell silent again. But it was a different kind of silence now. Yesterday, the quiet had been suffocating, pressing down on me like a physical weight. Today, it felt more like space, room to breathe, room to think, room to decide who I was going to be in this next chapter of my life. I walked through each room slowly, really seeing them for the first time since Robert died. The living room with its worn sofa, the one we'd bought 30 years ago and kept promising to replace but never did because it was so comfortable. The dining room table where we'd hosted Thanksgivings and Christmases, back when David and Jennifer still came home for holidays. That had been, 8 years ago now? Maybe 9? In the hallway, I stopped at the photo wall. Robert had hung these pictures himself, spending an entire Sunday getting them perfectly level. Our legacy, he'd called it, standing back to admire his work. Everything we've built together. I stared at David's Stanford graduation photo. He was grinning, diploma held high, his arm around Robert's shoulders. I remembered that day so clearly. Robert had been so proud he'd cried during the ceremony, big unashamed tears rolling down his weathered face. Afterward, David had thanked us, said he couldn't have done it without our support. That support had cost us $96,000 in tuition, room, and board. Money we'd scraped together through second mortgages, and Robert taking overtime shifts at the shipyard. I remembered him coming home at midnight, sometimes later, his hands blistered and bleeding from the work. It's worth it, he'd say, kissing my forehead. Our boy's going to Stanford. Next to it hung Jennifer's white coat ceremony photo. She looked so young, so earnest in that crisp white coat with her name embroidered on it. Jennifer Chen, M.D. I'd made Robert drive 8 hours to Boston for that ceremony. We'd stayed in a cheap motel because the hotels near Harvard were too expensive. Robert had insisted on taking her to dinner afterward at a nice restaurant, even though I knew we couldn't really afford it. She's a doctor now, Maggie, he'd said, ordering champagne. Our baby girl's a doctor. That's worth celebrating. That celebration had cost us $192,000 in medical school tuition. Robert had worked until he was 73, 3 years past retirement age, to help pay off those loans. His body had been breaking down, bad knees, worse back, hands that ached constantly from decades of manual labor, but he kept going. For her. For them. And now she was posting brunch photos with mimosas while his body lay in the ground. I turned away from the photos, unable to look at them anymore. In the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator to find casseroles and covered dishes from neighbors Mrs. Rodriguez's pozole, Mr. Kim's japchae, Sarah Martinez's green chile enchiladas. People who barely knew us had cooked for me, had shown up, had cared. My own children had sent text messages asking about life insurance policies. I pulled out Mrs. Rodriguez's pozole and heated it on the stove, the familiar smells filling the kitchen. Robert had loved Rosa's cooking. Better than restaurant food, he'd always say, making Rosa blush with pleasure, simple kindness, simple appreciation. Why did that seem so rare now? While the soup heated, I opened my laptop, an old Dell that Robert had bought me 5 years ago for my birthday. "So you can email the kids," he'd said. The kids who rarely responded to my emails unless they needed something. I logged into my bank account, something I hadn't done in weeks. Robert had always handled the finances. "You taught kindergarten for 40 years, Maggie," he'd say. "You deserve to retire without worrying about numbers." So, I'd let him manage it all, trusting him completely. Now I stared at the numbers on the screen, really understanding them for the first time. Our savings account, $42,318. That was everything we had left after a lifetime of work. After Robert's 40 years at the shipyard and my 40 years teaching 5-year-olds their ABCs, I pulled up our bank statements from the past 5 years. There, in black and white, was the story of our financial life. A story of constant giving. January 2021, wire transfer to David Chen, $35,000. The memo line read, Startup Capital Third Venture. May 2021, check to Jennifer Chen, $12,000. Memo, help with Tesla down payment. September 2022. Wire transfer to David Chen, $28,000. Memo, credit card consolidation. March 2023, check to Jennifer Chen, $8,500. Memo, new furniture for condo. On and on it went. Dozens of transfers, hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing in one direction, out. Always out, never back. I clicked on our retirement account. $15,762. We'd started that account when we were 40 years old, planning to build it up for our golden years. For the Alaska cruise Robert had always wanted. For maybe a small cabin in the mountains where we could watch the seasons change. But every time we'd built up a little cushion, one of the kids would call with an emergency, a business opportunity, a necessary expense. And we'd liquidate part of the retirement fund, because that's what parents do. That's what love means. Doesn't it? I thought about David's text this morning. The house is worth at least $850K in this market. He'd already had it appraised, apparently. Already knew exactly what his father's legacy was worth in dollars and cents. The house that Robert had bought for $112,000 in 1977. The house he'd spent 28 years restoring, room by room, nail by nail. The house where we'd raised our children, celebrated our anniversaries, grown old together. To David, it was just $850,000. My phone rang again. I didn't even look at it. Let it ring. Let them wonder. Let them wait for once. But the ringing wouldn't stop. 5 calls, 6, 7. Finally, I answered. What, David? Jesus, Mom, finally. I've been calling for an hour. I was busy. Busy with what? Look, never mind. Jennifer and I have been talking. Of course you have. And we think you need to come stay with one of us for a while. Just until we get everything sorted out. You shouldn't be alone in that big house. I've been alone in this house for 3 weeks, David. Since your father's stroke. Where were you then? That's not fair. I have a business to run. Investors to answer to. And I had a husband dying. But apparently your investors matter more than your father. Silence. Then, his voice tight. I'm not going to apologize for being successful, Mom. Dad would have wanted me to focus on my career. Your father wanted you to be at his funeral. He wanted you there when he was dying. He wanted my voice cracked. He wanted his son. I'm trying to help you. No. The word came out sharp, clean. No, David, you're not. You're trying to manage me like I'm one of your business problems. Liquidate the assets, minimize the complications, maximize the return. That's what this is about. That's ridiculous. Is it? You want to sell this house before your father's been dead a week. You want to put me in a facility for $3,000 a month so you and Jennifer can manage the rest. You haven't asked me once how I'm doing. You haven't said you miss him. You haven't. I stopped, breathless, my heart hammering in my chest. You're being emotional. I'm being human, the shout echoed through the empty kitchen. I'm being human, David. I'm grieving my husband. I'm mourning the man I spent 54 years with. I'm trying to figure out how to live in a world without him. That's called being human. You should try it sometime. I don't have to listen to this. His voice was cold now, that executive tone he probably used on employees he was about to fire. When you're ready to have a rational conversation about your future, call me back. He hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, shaking with something that felt like rage but deeper, more primal. This was my son, the baby I'd carried, birthed, nursed, raised. The boy who used to climb into bed with us during thunderstorms, who'd cried when his first dog died, who'd told me I was the best mom in the world. When had he become this stranger? The pozole started to bubble over on the stove. I turned off the heat, but didn't serve it. Suddenly, I wasn't hungry anymore. I was nauseous again, that sick feeling rising in my throat like yesterday. I made it to the bathroom this time, kneeling on the cold tile floor, retching until there was nothing left. My body was rejecting this reality, trying to purge the poison of it. But you can't vomit out betrayal. You can't flush away the knowledge that your children see you as nothing more than a bank account with a heartbeat. When I finally stopped, I sat on the bathroom floor, my back against the tub, the same tub where I'd bathed David and Jennifer when they were babies, where Robert and I had given them bubble baths while they shrieked with laughter. I could almost hear those laughs echoing off the tile, ghosts of a happier time. How long I sat there, I don't know. Long enough for my legs to go numb, long enough for the afternoon light to fade to evening, long enough to make another decision. I pulled myself up using the sink, caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. I looked old, not just 82 years old, but ancient, hollowed out. My eyes were red-rimmed, my skin gray, my hair still mostly dark. Robert used to say I'd never really go gray, hanging limp and lifeless around my face. This is what grief looks like, I thought. This is what betrayal does to a person. But then I looked closer, past the tired eyes and the tear-stained cheeks, and I saw something else, something harder, something that had been forged in the fire of these past few days. Resolve. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and opened my contacts. James Morrison, our lawyer for 30 years, a man Robert had trusted completely. I typed out a text. James, this is Margaret Chen. I need to see you as soon as possible, tomorrow if you can manage it. I need to change my will, and I need to do it right. Can you fit me in? The response came within minutes. Margaret, of course. Come to my office at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I'll clear my schedule. My condolences again on Robert's passing. I set down the phone and looked around the kitchen at Robert's coffee mug still on the counter, at his reading glasses on top of yesterday's newspaper, at the refrigerator covered with old photos held up by magnets, photos of grandchildren he barely knew, of children who'd forgotten how to love him. Tomorrow I would take the first step toward reclaiming my life, toward honoring Robert's memory the right way, toward making sure that what we'd built together went to people who would treasure it, not liquidate it. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight, I sat at the table with Mrs. Rodriguez's pozole and Robert's ghost, and I let myself grieve, not just for the man I'd lost, but for the family I'd thought I had. And somewhere in that grief, I found the strength to do what came next. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's face in that Stanford graduation photo, heard Jennifer's voice on that voicemail, felt the weight of Robert's absence pressing down on my chest like a physical thing. At 3 a.m, I gave up pretending and went downstairs. The house creaked and settled around me, familiar sounds that used to be comforting. Now they just reminded me how empty everything was. I found myself drawn back to Robert's study, his sanctuary, the one room in the house that was completely his, filled with his books, his papers, his careful filing systems. A place for everything and everything in its place, he'd always say, organizing another folder, labeling another drawer. I sat in his leather chair, worn smooth by decades of use, and pulled open the filing cabinet. I'd looked at the financial records yesterday, but there were other drawers, Other files. Other pieces of Robert's life I hadn't examined yet. You've made it this far. Go ahead and hit like to let me know you're still with me. You know, every share you make might help someone out there find a little hope. And before we continue, don't forget to subscribe because who knows, the next story might just touch your heart. The second drawer was labeled Family Correspondence. I'd never looked in it before. It felt like invading Robert's privacy even though he was gone. But something pushed me to open it now. Inside were folders for each of us. One labeled Margaret, one for David, one for Jennifer, and surprisingly, one for Tyler. I pulled out David's folder first. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Letters David had written home from Stanford, from his first apartment in San Francisco, from various business trips. I opened the first one, dated September 1998, David's freshman year. Dear Mom and Dad, thank you for everything you've done to get me here. I know it wasn't easy. I know you sacrificed a lot. I promise I'll make you proud. I'll work hard and become someone you can brag about. I love you both so much. Your son, David. The handwriting was young, enthusiastic, full of loops and energy. I remembered getting this letter. Robert had read it 3 times, then tucked it away carefully. He's going to do great things, Maggie, he'd said. Our boy's going to be something special. I read through more letters. They were all like that in the beginning, grateful, loving, full of promises and appreciation. But as I moved through the years, something changed. The letters became shorter, less frequent, more focused on what David needed rather than what he wanted to share. By 2005, the letters had stopped entirely, replaced by emails brief, businesslike, need to discuss investment opportunity. Call when you can you help with down payment? Market's hot right now. Emergency credit cards maxed out. Can you wire funds? Robert had printed them all out, filed them carefully, kept every single one. At the bottom of David's folder, I found something else. A letter in Robert's handwriting, dated just 2 months ago. The envelope was sealed, addressed to David but never sent. My hands shook as I opened it. Dear David, I'm writing this because I can't seem to say it to your face. Maybe because we don't see your face much anymore. Your mother and I are getting old, son. I had another health scare last week, nothing serious, the doctor says. But at my age, every scare feels serious. I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately. Not the money kind, though God knows your mother and I have given you plenty of that. I mean the other kind. The kind that matters when you're lying in a hospital bed wondering if you'll see another morning. What I want to know is, did we raise you right? Did we teach you what matters? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like maybe we failed. Maybe we gave you too much and required too little. Maybe we loved you so much that we forgot to teach you how to love back. You haven't visited in 2 years, David. 2 years. Your mother makes excuses for you, she always does. But I see it for what it is. We're not a priority. We're convenient when you need something, invisible when you don't. I'm not writing this to make you feel guilty. I'm writing because I need you to understand something. Your mother is going to need you when I'm gone. She's strong, but she's not invincible. She's going to need her children to actually be her children, not just her financial advisors or real estate consultants. Please, son, be better than you've been. For her, if not for me. Love always, Dad. I read it twice, 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Robert had known. He'd seen what I'd been blind to, or maybe just unwilling to acknowledge. He'd tried to reach David one last time, and then what? Lost his nerve? Decided it wouldn't matter? I pulled out Jennifer's folder with trembling hands. More letters, following the same pattern. Grateful and loving in the beginning, then gradually becoming transactional. And at the bottom, another unsent letter from Robert, this one dated 3 weeks before his stroke. Dear Jennifer, your mother brags about you to everyone she meets. My daughter, the doctor, she says, her voice full of pride. And I am proud too. You accomplished something amazing. You saved lives. You became exactly what you set out to be. But somewhere along the way, I think you forgot where you came from, or maybe you just decided it didn't matter anymore. Do you remember when you were 8 and you broke your arm falling off your bike? You were so scared at the hospital, crying for your mama. I held you while they set the bone, and I promised you that we'd always be there when you were scared, that you'd never have to face anything alone. I'm scared now, Jenny. The doctors don't say it outright, but I can read between the lines. My heart's giving out. Your mother doesn't know yet. I haven't told her because I don't want her to worry. But you should know. You're a doctor. You understand what congestive heart failure means at my age. I'm not asking you to fix it. I know you can't. I'm just asking you to be here, to hold your mother's hand when the time comes, to remember that before you were Dr. Jennifer Chen, you were our Jenny, our baby girl. We love you. We've always loved you. I just hope that's enough. Dad. I couldn't breathe. The letter fell from my hands as I doubled over, sobbing so hard I thought I might break. Robert had known he was dying. He'd known, and he'd tried to reach them, tried to prepare them, tried one last time to connect with the children we'd raised. And he'd never sent the letters. Why? Because he knew they wouldn't matter? Because he was protecting me from the disappointment? Because he'd already accepted what I was only now beginning to understand, that we'd lost them long ago? I don't know how long I sat there on the floor of his study, surrounded by folders and letters and the paper trail of our family's slow disintegration. Eventually the crying stopped. Not because the pain lessened, but because I'd simply run out of tears. I picked up Tyler's folder. It was thinner than the others, but somehow heavier. Inside were report cards Tyler had given his grandfather, drawings from when he was little, photos from camping trips I barely remembered. And letters not from Tyler to Robert, but from Robert to Tyler, letters he had sent. I pulled one out at random, dated last year. Dear Tyler, thank you for helping me in the garden yesterday. My back isn't what it used to be, and having you there made the work lighter in more ways than one. You remind me of myself at your age, curious about everything, eager to learn, not afraid of hard work. Your grandmother and I are so proud of you, not just because you're doing well in school, though we are proud of that, but because you're becoming a good man, a kind man, someone who sees people, who listens, who shows up. Never lose that, Tyler. In a world that's increasingly focused on success and money and status, never forget that showing up is what matters most. Keep being you. The world needs more people like you. Love, Grandpa. I pressed the letter to my chest, fresh tears starting again. But these were different. These weren't tears of betrayal or loss. These were tears of gratitude. Robert had found this. In Tyler, he'd found what David and Jennifer had stopped being. And he'd nurtured it, encouraged it, celebrated it. He'd known. He'd already known who deserved our legacy. The sun was starting to rise when I finally left the study, arms full of folders. I made coffee 2 cups, out of habit, and sat at the kitchen table, organizing everything I'd found. The letters from David and Jennifer, documenting their transformation from loving children to entitled strangers, Robert's unsent pleas, his desperate hope that they might change. His letters to Tyler, showing what real family looked like. At 8:30 my phone rang. Jennifer. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Yes? Mom, thank God, I've been so worried. David said you were being irrational yesterday. Irrational. Well, yes, he said you hung up on him, that you were saying crazy things about the house. I found Dad's letters, I said quietly. Silence. Then, what letters? The ones he wrote to you. The ones he never sent. The one where he told you his heart was failing and he needed you to be here for me. More silence. Longer this time. Mom, I don't. He knew he was dying, Jennifer. For weeks, he knew. And he wrote to you, begging you to show up. Not for him. For me. Because he knew I'd need you. I didn't know. Because he never sent it. My voice rose. He never sent it because he already knew you wouldn't come. He already knew that your career, your life, your convenience mattered more than we did. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Read the letter, Jennifer. I'm going to photograph it and text it to you right now. Read what your father wrote. Read what he never got to say because he was protecting you from the truth that you'd already abandoned us long before he died. Mom, I can't. I have rounds in 10 minutes. Of course you do. You always have something more important. I hung up before she could respond. I photographed both letters, David's and Jennifer's, with shaking hands, sent them in a group text to both my children, added only one line. This is who your father was. This is who you've become. Then I turned off my phone, poured Robert's untouched coffee down the sink, and got ready to meet with James Morrison. It was time to make sure Robert's real legacy, His kindness, his love, his understanding of what truly mattered went to someone who would honor it. Tyler deserved everything. David and Jennifer deserved the truth. And I deserved to finally put myself first. James Morrison's law office sat on the corner of 3rd and Morrison Street, a coincidence Robert had always found amusing. Morrison on Morrison, he'd joke every time we visited. Makes it easy to remember. The building was old Portland, red brick with tall windows that let in the gray morning light. I'd been coming here for 30 years for the house closing, for our wills, for Robert's business papers when he started his small handyman side business after retirement. James had handled everything, always patient, always thorough, always fair. I climbed the stairs slowly, my knees protesting with each step. 82 years old, and suddenly I felt every single day of it. The folders I carried Robert's letters, the financial records, the evidence of everything felt like they weighed 100 pounds. The receptionist, a young woman named Emma who'd been with James for 5 years, looked up with genuine sympathy. "Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry about Mr. Chen. He was such a lovely man." "Thank you, Emma." My voice came out steady, surprisingly so. He really was. "Mr. Morrison cleared his whole morning for you. Go right in." James stood when I entered, coming around his massive oak desk to embrace me. He was 73 now, silver-haired and distinguished, but his hug was warm and real. "Margaret." "I'm so sorry." Robert was one of the good ones. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. He guided me to the leather chair across from his desk, then settled back into his own seat. On the wall behind him hung his law degree from Lewis and Clark, a photo of his late wife Eleanor, and a picture of his 3 daughters. Family. Real family. "I have to say," James began gently, "I was surprised to get your message. You and Robert just updated your wills 2 years ago. Everything was in order." "Everything was in order," I repeated. "For a family that no longer exists." His eyebrows rose, but he said nothing, just waited. That was James's gift, the ability to listen without judgment, to let silence do its work. I opened the first folder. David and Jennifer didn't come to Robert's funeral. James's face remained neutral, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or recognition. They didn't come to the hospital when he was dying. They haven't visited in years, David, not for 2 years, Jennifer for 3. But the day after the funeral, do you know what they did? I pulled out my phone, powered it on long enough to show him the screenshots I'd taken. David's texts about selling the house, Jennifer's Instagram post about brunch and mimosas, the messages asking about life insurance policies. James read them in silence, his jaw tightening with each swipe. When he finished, he set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. "I see. That's not all." I opened the second folder, pulling out the bank statements. "Over $500,000, James. That's how much Robert and I gave them over the years. Every time they called with a crisis, we emptied our accounts. We mortgaged this house twice. Robert worked 3 years past retirement, his body breaking down, to pay for Jennifer's medical school. I laid out the statements one by one, a paper trail of unconditional love met with conditional gratitude. And this, the third folder. Robert's unsent letters. My husband knew he was dying. He wrote to them, begging them to be here for me after he was gone. He never sent these letters because he already knew they wouldn't come. He was protecting me from that final disappointment. James picked up the letter to David, read it slowly. Then Jennifer's. When he finished, he removed his reading glasses and rubbed his eyes. "My God, Margaret. I want them out of the will, James." "Completely. Everything goes to Tyler, Jennifer's son. He's the only one who showed up, the only one who cared, the only one who deserves what Robert and I built." James nodded slowly. "I can do that. It's your right. But Margaret, I need to make sure you understand what this means." David and Jennifer could contest the will. They could claim undue influence, especially given how recently Robert passed. It could get ugly. Let it get ugly. I have the evidence. I have their text messages. I have their social media posts. I have 3 decades of financial records showing what we gave them, and I have Robert's letters showing what they refused to give us. I leaned forward. Let them contest it. Let them explain to a judge why they deserve to inherit from a father whose funeral they couldn't be bothered to attend. James studied me for a long moment. "You're sure about this? Once we file the new will, there's no going back." I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He opened his laptop. All right, let's start with the basics. As it stands, your current will splits everything 50-50 between David and Jennifer. The house, the savings, Robert's pension survivor benefits, his life insurance. What would you like the new distribution to be? Everything to Tyler. The house, the savings, the life insurance proceeds. I want it set up in a trust. He's only 21. He can't access the principal until he's 30, but he can use it for education, housing, medical expenses. James typed rapidly. That's smart. It protects him and the assets. What about the house specifically? He gets that too. It stays in the trust until he's 30, but he can live there if he wants, or rent it out, whatever he chooses. I just don't want David and Jennifer to get 1 penny from the sale of the house their father built with his own hands. Understood. And your own care, if you need assisted living or medical care? I hesitated. This was something I hadn't fully considered. The trust should provide for that too. Tyler can be the trustee, with you as backup. If I need care, he makes those decisions, not David or Jennifer. Good, that's very good. More typing. Now, Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you doing this out of grief? Out of anger? Because if you are, we can wait. We can give you time to process everything before making such a significant change. I thought about his question. Really thought about it. Was I angry? Yes. Hurt? Beyond words. But was this decision coming from those emotions? No, I said finally. I'm doing this out of clarity. For the first time in maybe 50 years, I'm seeing my children clearly. Not who I wanted them to be, not who I hoped they'd become, but who they actually are. And what I see is people who measure love in dollars and convenience in minutes. People who couldn't spare 2 hours to honor their father but can spend all day planning how to divide up his estate. I pulled out one more piece of paper, the list I'd made at 3 a.m, unable to sleep. This is every time in the past 5 years that I called them just to talk. Not to ask for anything. Not for a holiday. Just to hear their voices. The list was short, painfully short. 17 calls to David. He answered 4 times. Average length, 6 minutes. 11 calls to Jennifer. She answered twice. Average length, 8 minutes. I looked up at James. Do you know how many times they called me in those same 5 years? 3. 3 times. And each time, they needed something. James closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. Eleanor and I had 3 girls. They call every week. They visit once a month. They fight over who gets to host Thanksgiving. His voice cracked slightly. I can't imagine what you're going through. Then help me, I said quietly. Help me make sure that what Robert and I built goes to someone who will treasure it. Someone who understands that family isn't about what you can take. It's about what you're willing to give. He reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. I'll draw up the new will today. You can come back tomorrow to sign it. I'll make sure it's airtight, no loopholes, no ambiguities. If David and Jennifer want to contest it, they'll have to explain their actions to a probate judge. And trust me, judges don't look kindly on children who abandon their parents. Thank you, James. There's one more thing we should discuss. He pulled up another document on his screen. Robert had a small life insurance policy through the shipyard union. $75,000. The beneficiaries are currently listed as David and Jennifer, to be split evenly. My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten about that policy. Robert had set it up 40 years ago, back when the kids were small and we were terrified something might happen to one of us. Can we change that? We can. You're the surviving spouse, so you have the authority to change the beneficiary designation. Who would you like it to go to? I thought for a moment. An idea was forming, something that felt right in a way nothing else had in days. I want to set up a scholarship fund. The Robert Chen Memorial Scholarship. For first-generation college students at Portland Community College. Kids who are working their way through school, who don't have parents with money to spare. Kids who will appreciate the opportunity because they know what it costs. James smiled, really smiled. For the first time since I'd arrived, Robert would have loved that. He would have. He was always a first-generation success story himself. His parents were immigrants, came here with nothing, worked in the canneries. He was the first in his family to graduate high school, let alone build a career. He understood what it meant to pull yourself up. He would want to help others do the same. Then that's what we'll do. I'll set up the scholarship fund, make you the founder, and designate the life insurance proceeds as the initial funding. $75,000 will help a lot of students. We spent the next hour going through every detail. James asked questions, I answered. He made suggestions, I agreed or modified. By the time we finished, my new will was clear, comprehensive, and unbreakable. Come back tomorrow at 10, James said as I stood to leave. I'll have everything ready for your signature. Bring 2 witnesses. They can't be family members or beneficiaries. Maybe Mrs. Rodriguez from next door? Rosa would be honored. As I gathered my folders, James stopped me. Margaret? For what it's worth, I think Robert would be proud of you. What you're doing, it takes courage, it takes clarity, and it takes love. Real love, not the fake kind that's all smiles when there's money on the table and gone when the well runs dry. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Walking out of that office, I felt different. Lighter somehow, despite the weight of everything I was carrying. The gray Portland morning seemed less oppressive. The rain that had started falling felt almost cleansing. Tomorrow I would sign the papers. Tomorrow I would make it official. But today, I had one more thing to do. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Tyler. Can you come over this afternoon? There's something important I need to tell you. His response came within seconds. On my way, Grandma. Love you. 3 words David and Jennifer hadn't said to me in years. 3 words that meant everything. Tyler arrived at 2 o'clock, letting himself in with the key Robert had given him last summer. For emergencies, Robert had said, but really it was just an excuse to make Tyler feel like he belonged here, like this house was his too. I heard the door open, heard him call out, Grandma, it's me. His voice was so much like Robert's, the same warm timbre, the same careful way of announcing himself so as not to startle me. In the kitchen, sweetheart. He appeared in the doorway, and I had to catch my breath. He was wearing Robert's old Reed College sweatshirt, the one my husband had bought at Tyler's orientation 2 years ago, then accidentally left here so Tyler would have warm clothes when he visited. Robert's small ways of taking care of people, even from beyond the grave. Hey, Grandma. Tyler crossed the kitchen and hugged me, a real hug that lasted more than the obligatory 2 seconds. When he pulled back, his eyes were red-rimmed. I've been thinking about Grandpa all day. I went to the cemetery this morning, brought him some coffee from that place on Hawthorne he liked. My throat tightened. The one with the good apple fritters? Yeah, I got him one of those too, left it on his grave. Tyler's voice cracked. I know it's stupid, but I wanted him to know I was there, that I didn't forget. I grabbed his hand and squeezed. It's not stupid, it's beautiful. We sat at the kitchen table, and I poured us both coffee. Tyler doctored his the way Robert used to, lots of cream, 3 sugars. Another similarity I'd never noticed before. Grandma, Tyler said carefully, Mom called me this morning. She was really upset. She said you sent her and Uncle David some kind of letter? From Grandpa? I'd been expecting this. I sent them copies of letters your grandfather wrote but never mailed. Letters where he begged them to be here for me after he was gone. Letters where he told them his heart was failing and he needed them to step up. Tyler's face went pale. Grandpa knew? He knew he was dying and didn't tell anyone? He told them. Or tried to. He just never sent the letters because I stopped, trying to find the right words. Because he already knew they wouldn't come. He was trying to protect me from that disappointment. Jesus. Tyler ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so like Robert it hurt. Mom said you're cutting them out of the will. I am. He looked at me, really looked. His green eyes, my eyes searching my face. Because of the funeral? Because of everything. The funeral was just the final piece of evidence in a case I've been building against them for years without realizing it. I pulled out the folders I'd brought home from the lawyer's office. Do you want to see? Do you want to understand why? Tyler hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I do. I showed him everything. The bank statements documenting the $500,000 we'd given David and Jennifer. The record of phone calls, my 17 attempts to reach David, Jennifer's 2 answered calls in 5 years. The text messages about selling the house, the Instagram posts, the cold calculation of their father's death. With each piece of evidence, Tyler's expression grew harder, angrier. When I showed him Robert's unsent letters, tears started streaming down his face. I didn't know, he whispered. Grandma, I swear I didn't know any of this. Mom told me Grandpa died peacefully in his sleep. She said the funeral was private, immediate family only, that you didn't want a big thing. She said you were handling it and didn't need me to come. I know you didn't know, honey. Your mother lied to you to keep you away. She didn't want you here because she knew you'd see the truth that she and your uncle didn't show up. Tyler wiped his eyes roughly. I would have been here. I would have dropped everything. Why would she? He stopped, understanding dawning. She didn't want me to know what kind of person she is. Or maybe she didn't want you to be here because she knew you'd take my side. And she couldn't have that, not when there's money at stake. This is about money? My grandfather just died and she's worried about money? I showed him David's texts about the house valuation, Jennifer's questions about life insurance, their detailed plans for my future in assisted living while they managed Robert's estate. Tyler stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. This is insane. I can't even. He turned to me, his face flushed with anger. What can I do? How can I help? You already are helping. Just by being here. Just by caring. I took a deep breath. But there's something else I need to tell you. Something important. He sat back down, leaning forward, focused completely on me. I'm changing my will. Everything I have. Everything your grandfather and I built together, the house, the savings, the life insurance, it's all going to you. Tyler's mouth opened, closed, opened again. What? Grandma? No, I can't. That's not why I'm here. I didn't come here for money. I know you didn't. That's exactly why you're getting it. I reached across the table and took both his hands. Tyler, you're the only one who showed up. The only one who cared more about us than about what we could give you. The only one who loved your grandfather for who he was, not what he was worth. But Mom and Uncle David, they're your kids. You're not just anything. You're the person who visited every month without being asked, who helped your grandfather in the garden, who called me to talk about your classes, your life, your dreams, who brought coffee to a grave this morning because you wanted your grandfather to know you were thinking of him. My voice broke. You're the grandson who would have been at that funeral if he'd known about it. You're the family Robert and I deserved. Tyler was crying openly now. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Say you'll use it wisely. Say you'll remember us. Of course I will. God, Grandma, of course. He came around the table and hugged me, and we both cried for Robert, for the family that could have been, for the future we were choosing together. When we finally pulled apart, I told him about the scholarship fund. Robert's life insurance transformed into opportunities for students like he'd been first generation, working class, fighting their way up. That's perfect, Tyler said, his voice thick with emotion. Grandpa would love that. He was always talking about how lucky he was to get his chance, how he wanted to help others get theirs. I need you to help me run it. After I'm gone, you'll be in charge of choosing the recipients. I want you to look for kids like your grandfather, was not necessarily the ones with the best grades or the most impressive resumes, but the ones who show up, the ones who work hard. The ones who understand that opportunity is a gift, not a right. I can do that. I want to do that. Tyler wiped his eyes. When do you sign the new will? Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I need 2 witnesses who aren't family. Mrs. Rodriguez is one. Would you help me find another? Mr. Kim from the corner store. He was at the funeral. He'd do it. I nodded. Mr. Kim, who'd closed his store for 2 hours to pay respects to a customer he barely knew. Another person who'd shown more love than my own children. Grandma, Tyler said quietly, what happens when Mom and Uncle David find out? They'll be angry. They might contest the will. They might say terrible things about me, about you. They might try to paint me as a bitter old woman who was manipulated or mentally incompetent. But you're not. You're the clearest thinking person I know. I know that. You know that. James Morrison knows that. And if it comes to it, a judge will know it too. I have evidence, Tyler. I have their text messages, their social media posts, your grandfather's letters, decades of financial records. If they want to contest this will, they'll have to explain to a court why they deserve to inherit from a man whose funeral they skipped. Tyler's jaw set in a way that reminded me of Robert when he'd made up his mind about something. Let them try. I'll testify. I'll tell the judge everything, how they lied to me about the funeral, how they've ignored you for years, all of it. It might get ugly. I don't care. This is about what's right. This is about honoring Grandpa. This is about making sure you're taken care of. He squeezed my hands. I'm not going anywhere, Grandma. They might be your kids, but I'm your family. We spent the rest of the afternoon going through Robert's things, not to inventory them for sale, but to remember. Tyler tried on Robert's old fishing hat, and we laughed because it was too big, just like it had been too big on Robert. We found the photo albums, spent hours looking at pictures of better times David and Jennifer as children, before entitlement replaced gratitude, before success replaced love. They weren't always like this, I said softly, looking at a picture of 5-year-old David hugging Robert's leg. They were good kids once, sweet kids. I don't know when it changed. Maybe it didn't change all at once, Tyler said. Maybe it was gradual. Little choices that added up, calls not returned, visits postponed. Until one day they woke up and realized they'd become people who'd missed their own father's funeral. Do you think they even realize what they've lost? Tyler looked at the photo for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe someday they will, but by then it'll be too late. He was right, it was already too late. The damage was done, the betrayal complete. Tomorrow I would make it official. Tomorrow I would choose the family that had chosen me. But today, I sat with my grandson in the house my husband built, surrounded by memories of love both lost and found, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Peace. Not happiness, not yet. The grief was still too raw, the hurt too fresh. But peace. The peace of knowing I was doing the right thing. The peace of being with someone who genuinely cared. The peace of honoring Robert's memory in a way that mattered. Thank you for being here, I told Tyler as the afternoon sun started to fade. There's nowhere else I'd rather be, he said. And I knew he meant it. That's the difference, I thought. That's what separates real family from the kind that only shows up when there's something to gain. Real family shows up. Period. And tomorrow, I would make sure the law recognized that truth. The knock on my door came at 7 in the morning, harsh and insistent. I was already awake, I'd barely slept, my mind running through everything that would happen today. The will signing at 10, the final, irrevocable step, the point of no return. But this knock wasn't Tyler coming early. This was angry, demanding. I opened the door to find Jennifer standing there, still in her scrubs from what must have been an overnight shift. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face pale with exhaustion and something else. Fury. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. Good morning to you too, Jennifer. She spun around in the living room and I saw she'd been crying. Good, I thought viciously. Let her feel 1/10 of what I've felt. How could you do this? Her voice cracked. How could you send me that letter? Dad's letter? Do you have any idea how cruel that is? Cruel? I closed the door slowly, carefully. You want to talk about cruel? Let's talk about missing your father's funeral. Let's talk about posting brunch photos while he was being buried. Let's talk about calling me the day of his funeral to discuss selling his house. That's not your twisting everything. If you find this part truly thought-provoking, go ahead and hit like to show your support. Do you feel the same way as the character in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Am I? Then explain the Instagram post, Jennifer. Explain exactly what I needed after a rough week. Your father died. That's how you described it. A rough week. Her face flushed red. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. I save lives, Mom. Actual lives. Every day. I can't just drop everything. Your father was dying for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Jennifer. You couldn't take one day? One single day to say goodbye? I thought he'd pull through. You always said he was strong. I told you to come. I told you it was serious, and you said I was being dramatic. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. You called his dying a health scare. You treated it like I was overreacting about a cold. Jennifer's hands clenched into fists. I got your text, the one with Dad's letters. David got it too. We've been talking. Of course you have. That's all you two do. Talk about me. Talk about the house. Talk about the money. You just never talk to me. That's not fair, isn't it? I walked to the kitchen table where I'd laid out the folders. I have phone records, Jennifer. 5 years worth. Want to see how many times you answered when I called? She didn't move, didn't respond. Twice. You answered twice in 5 years. But you know how many times you called me? 3. And every single time, you needed something. Money. Babysitting for Tyler. Help with your mortgage. Never just to talk. Never just to ask how I was. Never just because you loved me. I'd love you. No. The word came out sharp and final. No, you don't. You love what I can give you. There's a difference, and I'm finally smart enough to see it. Jennifer's face crumpled. She sank onto the couch, hands covering her face. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. David's coming, she said through her tears. He's on his way here right now. He's furious, Mom. He says you're being manipulated. He says Tyler's been poisoning you against us. Tyler has nothing to do with this. Tyler didn't have to do anything except show up. That's all it took. Just showing up. Because he wants the money. Can't you see that? He's been playing you, getting close to you, so he'd be in the will. Stop. My voice was ice. Tyler brought coffee to his grandfather's grave this morning. He sat with a dead man and talked to him because he loved him. He didn't know about the will change when he did that. He didn't know about any of it. And when I told him yesterday, do you know what he said? Jennifer looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. He said, I can't accept that. I didn't come here for money. That was his first response. Not how much? Not when do I get it? Not any of the questions you and your brother asked. He tried to refuse it because he thought it should go to you, my actual children. Then why are you doing this? Jennifer's voice was raw. Why are you cutting us out? Because you cut yourselves out. You did this, Jennifer, not me. Not Tyler. You and David. Every time you didn't answer the phone. Every time you canceled a visit. Every time you treated us like an ATM instead of your parents. You made this choice. I'm just making it official. The sound of a car door slamming made us both turn. Through the window, I saw David's Tesla in the driveway. He was out of the car and striding toward the house, his face a mask of rage. He didn't knock, just burst through the door like he owned the place. What the hell is going on? He demanded, not even looking at Jennifer. His eyes were fixed on me, cold and hard. You think you can just cut us out? After everything we've done for you? I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. Everything you've done for me? David, I have a filing cabinet full of evidence showing exactly what you've done for me. Nothing. You've done nothing except take. That's bullshit. I visited 2 years ago. Your last visit was 2 years ago, and it lasted 3 hours because you had a flight to catch. Before that? 3 years. Want me to keep going? I have a business to run. Do you have any idea how many people depend on me? How many employees, investors, clients? Your father depended on you. The words exploded out of me. Your father lay dying in a hospital bed and depended on you to be there, and you chose your investors instead. David's jaw clenched. This is about the funeral. You're doing all this because I missed one day. One day? My voice rose to a shout. It wasn't one day, David. It was every day. It was every phone call you didn't return, every visit you canceled, every holiday you had something better to do. It was years of watching you forget where you came from, who raised you, who sacrificed everything so you could become the success you are today. We didn't ask you to sacrifice. You didn't have to ask. That's what parents do. We gave you everything because we loved you. But love is supposed to go both ways, David. You're supposed to love us back. Not our money. Not what we could give you. Us. Jennifer stood up, moving to stand beside her brother. United against me. Of course. Mom, she said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone doctors use with difficult patients. I think you're not thinking clearly. You're grieving, you're emotional, and you're making rash decisions. Why don't we all take a breath, maybe get you to see someone? Someone? You mean a therapist? A psychiatrist? So you can prove I'm incompetent and contest the will? David and Jennifer exchanged a glance. I'd hit the nail on the head. That's your plan, isn't it? Get me declared mentally unfit. Take control of everything. Well, I have news for you both. James Morrison is one of the best lawyers in Portland. He's already documented my mental state. I've passed every test. I'm sharp as I've ever been, and I have evidence, mountains of it, Bank records, phone records, your text messages, your social media posts, your father's letters. Those letters were private, David snapped. They were addressed to you. He wrote them for you. The fact that he never sent them just proves he already knew you wouldn't care. That hit home. David's face paled, and Jennifer started crying again. If you contest this will, I continued, my voice deadly calm now, you'll have to explain to a judge why you deserve to inherit from a man whose funeral you skipped. You'll have to explain the Instagram posts and the text messages about selling the house. You'll have to explain why you lied to Tyler about the funeral. You'll have to explain $500,000 in gifts that you never paid back, never even thanked us for. Go ahead, contest it. See how that works out for you. David's hands were shaking with rage or fear, I couldn't tell. You're really gonna do this. You're really gonna give everything to Tyler. Tyler and the scholarship fund, yes. Your father's life insurance is going to help first-generation college students, kids who actually appreciate the opportunity, who understand what it costs. This is insane, David exploded. The house alone is worth $850. You're just gonna give that to a 21-year-old kid? He's your nephew, your son, I said to Jennifer. And yes, I'm giving it to him because he's the only one who loved your father for who he was, not what he was worth. We loved Dad, Jennifer started. Then, where were you? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Where were you when he needed you? Where were you when he was dying? Where were you at his funeral? Where were you yesterday, or the day before, or any day in the past 3 years? Silence. That's what I thought. I walked to the door and opened it. I'm signing the new will in 3 hours. You can stay and argue, or you can leave. Your choice. But nothing you say is going to change my mind. David stalked toward the door, then turned back. You're going to regret this. When you're old and sick and need help, don't come crying to us. I met his eyes steadily. David, I'm already old. And I've been sick with grief, with betrayal, with the slow realization that my children became strangers. But I won't need your help. I have Tyler, I have Rosa next door, I have Mr. Kim and Sarah Martinez and a dozen other people who've shown me more love in the past week than you have in the past decade. He left without another word. Jennifer hesitated at the door. Mom, she whispered, please, don't do this. We can fix this. We can be better. Just give us a chance. I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. But I'd heard those words before. After every missed visit, every unreturned call, every broken promise. We'll do better next time, Mom. Next time never came. The time to be better was when your father was alive, I said quietly. It's too late now. She left crying. I closed the door and leaned against it, my whole body shaking. But not with weakness, with strength, with certainty, with the knowledge that I'd done the right thing. At 9:30, Rosa arrived. At 9:45, Tyler came with Mr. Kim. At 10 o'clock exactly, we arrived at James Morrison's office. And at 10:15, I signed my name on the new will. It was done. The will was signed, witnessed, notarized, legal and binding. James Morrison placed the original in his fireproof safe and handed me 3 copies, one for me, one for Tyler, and one for his backup files. It's done, Margaret, he said, his hand on my shoulder. No one can change this now except you. I looked down at the document in my hands, at my signature in black ink at the bottom of page 12, Margaret Ann Chen. 82 years of life reduced to a legal document, but it was the right document. The true one. Thank you, James. Rosa and Mr. Kim signed the witness page, their signatures proof that I'd been of sound mind, that no one had coerced me, that this was my choice and mine alone. Mr. Kim squeezed my hand before he left. Mr. Robert would be proud, he said in his accented English. Very proud. Tyler walked me to my car, his arm around my shoulders. He'd been quiet during the signing, overwhelmed by the weight of what had just happened. Grandma, he said as we reached the parking lot, I want you to know something. This money, this house, it's not mine. It's yours. You can change your mind any time. You can, Tyler. I turned to face him. Stop. This is done, this is right. And I need you to promise me something. Anything. When I'm gone and don't argue, I'm 82, it won't be that long. I need you to remember what this was really about. Not the money, not the house, but about showing up. About being present. About loving people for who they are, not what they can give you. His eyes filled with tears. I promise. Good. Now go to class. You're missing environmental science, and your grandfather would haunt me if I let you fail because of family drama. He laughed through his tears, hugged me, and left. I watched him drive away in his old Honda Civic, the one he'd bought himself with money from his part-time job at Powell's bookstore. No Tesla for Tyler. He earned what he had. I drove home slowly, my hands still shaking slightly from the adrenaline of the morning's confrontation. David and Jennifer's faces kept flashing through my mind, the anger, the desperation, the barely concealed greed. Had they always been that way, or had I just been blind to it? When I pulled into the driveway, there was an unfamiliar car parked on the street. A rental, by the looks of it. My heart sank. Had they come back? Were David and Jennifer waiting to ambush me again? But when I got out of the car, the man who emerged from the rental wasn't David. He was younger, maybe late 20s, with David's dark hair but softer features. He was holding something in his hands, a small wooden box. "Mrs. Chen?" he called out, approaching carefully. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced. My name is Ethan. Ethan Chen. I'm David's son. Your grandson." I froze. David's son. I had another grandson, one I barely knew. David's first marriage had ended badly when Ethan was just a toddler. His ex-wife had moved to Seattle, and David had slowly faded from his son's life, citing work pressures and the difficulty of the distance. I'd sent birthday cards for years, Christmas presents, but after a while, they'd been returned, moved no forwarding address. "Ethan," I whispered. "My God, you're all grown up." 28 now, he said, offering a tentative smile. "I heard about Grandpa Robert. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it to the funeral. I was in Tokyo for work, and by the time I heard, he trailed off. I should have been there." Something in his voice, the genuine regret, made my throat tight. "Come inside," I said, "please." We sat in the living room, and I really looked at him. He had David's build, but his mother's kind eyes. He was wearing a simple button-down shirt and jeans, nothing flashy. The wooden box sat on his lap. "I wanted to bring you this," he said, holding out the box. "Grandpa Robert sent it to me about 5 years ago. I was going through a rough patch, lost my job. My girlfriend left me. I was pretty much at rock bottom, and then this arrived in the mail." I took the box with trembling hands. It was polished walnut, simple and elegant. Robert's work, I recognized his craftsmanship. "Open it," Ethan said softly. Inside was a letter in Robert's handwriting, a small photo of Ethan as a baby with Robert holding him, and a check. The check was for $5,000, dated 5 years ago but never cashed. I unfolded the letter, and Robert's voice seemed to fill the room. "Dear Ethan, your grandmother told me about your troubles. I know we haven't seen each other in years. That's on me and your father, not you. Adult problems that shouldn't have kept us apart. I want you to know something. You matter. Not because of who your father is, not because of what you might achieve, but because you're you. You're my grandson, and I remember the little boy who used to help me in the garden, even though you were so small you could barely hold the watering can. Life knocks us down sometimes. That's okay. What matters is getting back up. This money isn't charity. It's family helping family. Use it to get back on your feet. And when you're strong again, help someone else. That's how we honor each other. That's how love works. I'm proud of you, Ethan. I always have been. Love. Grandpa Robert." I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Robert had known. He'd kept track of Ethan somehow, had reached out when his grandson needed him, had been there even when the distance between them was measured in years and miles. "You never cashed the check," I said. I couldn't. By the time I was back on my feet, I wanted to return it, to tell him I'd made it through. But I kept putting it off, waiting until I'd really succeeded, until I could show him I was worth his faith. And then, his voice broke. "And then Tyler called me last week and told me Grandpa was gone. I was in Tokyo. I couldn't get a flight back in time. I failed him." "No." I reached across and gripped his hand. "No, sweetheart. You didn't fail him. He knew. He knew you were okay, and that's what mattered to him. Dad called me this morning," Ethan said quietly. "He was furious. Told me about the will, about how you're cutting him out. He said terrible things about you, about Tyler. He told me to come talk sense into you, to tell you that you're making a mistake. My heart sank. Of course, David would try to use Ethan as another weapon. But I'm not here for that, Ethan continued. I'm here because I wanted you to know that Grandpa Robert was a good man, the best man. And whatever you're doing, whatever decision you've made, I trust it. Because if there's one thing that letter taught me, it's that Grandpa understood what real family means, and I have to believe you do too. I couldn't speak. I just held his hand and cried for Robert, for the grandson I'd lost track of, for all the years we'd missed. Tell me about him, Ethan said. Tell me everything. I want to know who he was, not just the grandfather I remember from when I was little, but the man he became, the man who wrote me that letter. So I did. We sat there for hours, and I told him stories about Robert's rose garden, his love of jazz music, his terrible jokes that he thought were hilarious, about how he'd worked himself to exhaustion to provide for our family, how he'd never complained, how he'd loved with his whole heart even when that love wasn't returned. I told him about the funeral with empty pews, about David and Jennifer's texts and Instagram posts, about the $500,000 they'd taken and never repaid, about Robert's unsent letters and his broken heart. Ethan listened to it all, his face growing harder with each revelation about his father. I'm not surprised, he finally said. Dad's been like that as long as I can remember. Everything's transactional with him. I haven't spoken to him in 2 years because I got tired of only hearing from him when he wanted something. 2 years, I repeated. The same amount of time David hadn't visited me. I'm sorry I wasn't around more, Ethan said. Mom moved us away, and then I got busy with work, and somehow years just disappeared. But I want to change that. If it's okay with you, I'd like to visit more, get to know you properly, honor Grandpa by being the grandson he deserved. I'd like that very much. He stood to leave as the afternoon sun began to fade. At the door, he turned back. Mrs. Chen, Grandma, whatever you decided to do with your will, I support it. Dad doesn't deserve what Grandpa built. Neither does Aunt Jennifer. They chose money over family. Let them live with that choice. After he left, I sat in Robert's chair with the wooden box on my lap. Inside was a photo of baby Ethan in Robert's arms, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. Robert's face was younger, less lined with worry, full of joy. He'd tried to stay connected. Even when David had stopped bringing Ethan around, even when years had passed, Robert had kept track somehow, had sent that letter and that check when it was needed most, had been there in the way that mattered. My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. How are you doing, Grandma? Want me to come over? Before I could respond, another text appeared, this one from an unknown number. This is Ethan. Tyler gave me your number. Thank you for today. It meant everything. I'll come visit next weekend if that's okay. I looked at the 2 messages, then at the photo in the box, then at the house around me, Robert's house, filled with his love and his memory. This was what family looked like. Not David and Jennifer with their demands and their anger, but Tyler and Ethan and Rosa and Mr. Kim and all the people who showed up when it mattered. I typed back to both of them. I'd love that. Both of you. Come for dinner, I'll make your grandfather's famous pot roast. And for the first time since Robert died, I felt something like happiness. Real family, I thought. This is what real family feels like. 3 days after I signed the new will, the letters started arriving. The first one came by registered mail, requiring my signature. The return address was a law firm in San Francisco, Davis, Whitmore and Associates. I knew before I opened it what it would say. Dear Mrs. Chen, we represent David Chen in a matter concerning the estate of Robert Chen, deceased, and the last will and testament of Margaret Chen. It has come to our client's attention that substantial changes have been made to said will under circumstances that raise significant concerns regarding undue influence and potential exploitation of a vulnerable elderly with theirs person. I read the whole thing, all 3 pages of legal jargon that basically boiled down to David was threatening to sue me, to contest the will, to drag this through probate court and paint me as a senile old woman being manipulated by her grandson. I called James Morrison immediately. I was expecting this, he said calmly. Don't worry, Margaret, they're fishing. They have no case. You're of sound mind, we have documentation, we have witnesses. This is just intimidation. It's working, I admitted. My hands were shaking as I held the letter. James, I don't want to spend whatever time I have left fighting in court. You won't have to. I'll respond to this. I'll make it very clear that any contest will be met with a vigorous defense, complete with evidence of their neglect and exploitation. Trust me, once they see what we have, they'll back down. But they didn't back down. The next day, Jennifer showed up at my door again. This time she wasn't angry. She was crying, makeup running down her face, looking more like the little girl I'd raised than the cold stranger she'd become. "Mom, please," she said before I could even speak. "Please, we need to talk. Really talk." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the couch, twisting a tissue in her hands. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I know I wasn't there. I know I should have been. But I'm trying to make it right now. Are you?" I sat across from her, keeping distance between us. "Or are you trying to make sure you still get your inheritance?" She flinched. "That's not okay. Yes, the money matters. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But it's not just about the money, Mom. It's about Dad. It's about us. It's about this family falling apart. Jennifer, this family fell apart years ago. I'm just finally acknowledging it." "No." She leaned forward, desperate. "No, we can fix this. I can take time off work. I can visit more. You can do all of that now, when there's something at stake. But where were you when your father was dying? Where were you when I needed you, not wanted to make a transaction with you? I made a mistake. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Jennifer. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. A mistake is being late to dinner. What you did, what you and David both did, that was a choice. A series of choices, made over and over again for years." She stood up, pacing now. "Fine. You want me to admit I was a terrible daughter? I was. I was selfish and self-absorbed. And I took you and Dad for granted. There. I said it. Now what? You're just going to punish me forever? Cut me out of your life completely? I'm not cutting you out of my life. You're welcome to visit, to call, to be my daughter. But you're not entitled to Robert's legacy. You're not entitled to profit from a man you couldn't be bothered to say goodbye to. Tyler's turning you against us. Tyler has nothing to do with this." My voice rose. "Why is it so hard for you to understand that this is about your choices, not his manipulation? He didn't have to manipulate me. All he had to do was show up. That's literally all it took." Jennifer's face crumpled. "I can't lose everything. Mom, I have debt. Medical school loans, the mortgage on the condo, Tyler's college fund. I've been counting on this inheritance to—" And there it was. The truth, finally spoken out loud. "You've been counting on your father's death to solve your financial problems." "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant." I stood up, suddenly exhausted. "You've been waiting for us to die so you could cash in. That's what this has always been about. Not love, not family. Just money. Please, Mom, I'm begging you, don't do this. Don't give everything to Tyler. At least give me something. Half. A quarter. Anything." I walked to the door and opened it. "No. Mom, you had your father's love for 52 years. You had his sacrifice, his devotion, his unconditional support. You had everything that mattered, and you threw it away because it wasn't convenient. Now you want his money too? No. The answer is no." She left, but not before hissing, "You'll regret this. Dad would be ashamed of you." That one hit hard. I closed the door and leaned against it, her words echoing in my mind. Would Robert be ashamed? Was I being too harsh? Too unforgiving? I walked to his study, to the chair that still smelled faintly of him, and I opened the drawer with his unsent letters. I read them again, slowly, letting his words wash over me. "Your mother is going to need you when I'm gone. Please, son, be better than you've been. I'm scared now, Jenny. I need you to hold your mother's hand when the time comes." No, Robert wouldn't be ashamed. He'd be heartbroken that it had come to this, but he'd understand. He'd already understood, long before I did. The phone rang, David this time, not Jennifer. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You know that, right? This whole thing is ridiculous." "Hello to you too, David. Jennifer told me about your conversation. You're really going to stick to this, even after she apologized?" She didn't apologize for missing the funeral. She didn't apologize for the Instagram posts or the text messages about selling the house. She apologized for getting caught. There's a difference. You're being unreasonable. We're your children, as in noity tate is luber 5 on an Italina. Then, act like it. The words burst out of me. Act like my children. Visit me. Call me. Ask how I'm doing without following it up with a request for money. Show me that you care about something other than your inheritance. We do care. No, you don't. You care about the money. You care about the house. You care about what you think you're owed. But you don't care about me. Silence on the other end. Then, fine, have it your way. But you should know we're not backing down. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. Good luck with that. I hung up. My phone buzzed immediately with a text from David. Don't say we didn't warn you. This is going to get ugly. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. I was tired of their threats, their manipulations, their endless demands. Another text came through, this one from Tyler. Hey Grandma, Ethan and I were thinking about coming over this weekend with takeout from that Thai place Grandpa loved. Does Saturday work? I typed back immediately. Saturday is perfect. I'll make dessert. That evening, Rosa came over with more pozole. We sat in the kitchen, and I told her about Jennifer's visit, about David's threats, about the lawyer's letter. They're scared, Rosa said simply. They finally realize they've lost something they can never get back, and they're panicking. They're trying to make me feel guilty. Jennifer said Robert would be ashamed of me. Rosa's eyes flashed with anger. Robert would be ashamed of them. Don't let them twist this around. You're not the villain here, Margaret. You're the woman who finally said enough. But what if I'm wrong? What if I'm being too harsh? Too harsh? Rosa set down her spoon. Mija, listen to me. I watched you for 30 years. I watched you wait by the phone for calls that never came. I watched you make excuses for them when they canceled visits. I watched you cry after they'd leave because they'd barely stayed an hour. I watched your heart break piece by piece, and I watched Robert's heart break watching yours. If anything, you're not being harsh enough. I grabbed her hand. Thank you. I needed to hear that. You're doing the right thing. And when they finally calm down and really look at themselves, maybe they'll understand why. But even if they don't, you'll know you honored Robert's real legacy. Not the money, but the love. The real love. After Rosa left, I sat in the gathering darkness of the living room. Through the window, I could see Robert's rose bushes, bare now as October turned toward November. They'd bloom again in spring. They always did. But David and Jennifer, I wasn't sure they had a spring left in them. They'd let their capacity for genuine love wither away, replaced by entitlement and greed. My phone lit up with another message. This time from Ethan. Just wanted to say goodnight, Grandma. And thank you again for sharing Grandpa's stories with me. I've been thinking about that letter he sent me a lot. About how love means helping others. I want to live that way. He showed me how. I smiled through my tears and typed back. He'd be so proud of the man you've become. Sleep well, sweetheart. Then I turned off my phone, made myself a cup of tea, and sat in Robert's chair. Tomorrow would bring more threats, more manipulation, more attempts to make me doubt myself. But tonight, I had peace. The peace of knowing I'd chosen correctly, the peace of being surrounded by real love, even if it came from unexpected places. And that was enough. The letter from Wells Fargo arrived on a Thursday morning, mixed in with the usual pile of sympathy cards and bills. It was from Richard Jansen, the bank manager who'd handled Roberts and my accounts for 23 years. Dear Mrs. Chen, I hope this letter finds you as well as can be expected during this difficult time. I was deeply saddened to hear of Robert's passing. He was a good man and a valued client. I'm writing to request that you come in at your earliest convenience to discuss some account matters that require your attention. There are several items regarding Robert's accounts and beneficiary designations that need to be updated. Please call to schedule an appointment at your convenience. With sympathy, Richard Jansen. I called immediately and got an appointment for that afternoon. Something in the formal tone of the letter made my stomach clench. Richard had been warm and friendly at Robert's funeral, one of the few who'd actually shown up. This letter felt different, professional, careful. The bank was downtown, a solid brick building that had survived earthquakes and economic crashes since 1923. I'd been coming here since Robert and I opened our first joint account in 1971. The teller who'd helped us that day had given us free toasters as a sign-up bonus. We'd used those toasters for 15 years. Richard met me at the door to his office, shaking my hand with both of his. Margaret, thank you for coming so quickly. Please, sit down. His office had changed over the years. New computer, updated furniture, but the photo of his golden retriever still sat on his desk. Max, who died last year at 14. Richard had loved that dog almost as much as Robert had loved his roses. Richard, what's this about? Your letter sounded serious. He folded his hands on the desk, choosing his words carefully. Margaret, I received a call yesterday from David. And one this morning from Jennifer. They're claiming that you're not competent to manage your finances, and they're requesting that I freeze your accounts pending a competency evaluation. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of the chair. They what? They can't actually do that without a court order, Richard said quickly. I just wanted you to know what they're attempting. But Margaret, there's more. He pulled up something on his computer, then turned the monitor so I could see. It was a series of transactions from our joint checking account, the one that had become just my account when Robert died. 3 weeks ago, 2 days after Robert passed, there was an attempted wire transfer, $50,000 to David's business account. It was flagged by our fraud department because it was unusual. You and Robert never did wire transfers that large. When I looked into it, I found that someone had called in pretending to be you, using information about your account that only family would know. My heart was pounding. David tried to steal from me? We can't prove it was David specifically. The call came from a blocked number. But the receiving account was his. And the timing.